Billionaire was ready to sign the divorce, until his daughter's words made him realize family is everything. Before we begin, drop a comment telling us which city you're watching from. And once the story ends, don't forget to rate it from 0 to 10. Oh, and make sure to follow our channel for more stories like this. Now, sit back and enjoy every detail. The silence in the marble-floored foyer could cut glass. Graham Lockwood adjusted his Hermes tie for the third time, staring at the divorce papers scattered across his mahogany desk like fallen leaves. At 42, he commanded shipping routes across 3 continents, but couldn't navigate the distance between his bedroom and his wife's heart. The grandfather clock in the corner, a wedding gift from Charlotte's grandmother, chimed 7 a.m. Charlotte would be making coffee now, the same ritual for 11 years. He could hear the familiar sounds, the grinder's mechanical whir, the soft clink of porcelain, the gentle hum of their daughter Mia getting ready for school. Their daughter. The words felt foreign on his tongue, like speaking a language he'd forgotten how to use. Graham's phone buzzed against the glass surface. Another message from his assistant, Dexter, about the Shanghai deal. $300 million hanging in the balance. The kind of number that used to make his pulse quicken. Now it felt like background noise. He picked up the divorce papers again, Charlotte's handwriting stark against the legal text. Her note was still clipped to the first page. You didn't betray me with another woman. You betrayed me with your absence. 22 words that hit harder than any corporate takeover. The sound of small feet padding down the hardwood stairs made him look up. Mia appeared in the doorway, still in her rainbow pajamas, dark hair messy from sleep. She looked so much like Charlotte at that age. The same curious green eyes, the same stubborn chin. Daddy? Her voice was small, tentative. Are you going to the office already? Graham glanced at his Rolex. I have an important meeting, sweetheart. She nodded, used to this answer. But instead of leaving, she walked to his desk and climbed into his leather chair, her legs dangling like a child on a swing. In her small hands, she held a folded piece of paper. I made something for you. Graham's chest tightened. When was the last time she'd given him a drawing? Last month? Last year? The realization hit him like ice water. Mia unfolded the paper carefully, the way she handled everything precious. It was a crayon drawing, 3 stick figures holding hands in front of a house with a crooked chimney, a woman with long brown hair, a little girl with pigtails, and Graham stared. The third figure, him, was there, but faint, erased and redrawn so many times that it was barely visible, like a ghost caught between existing and disappearing. You kept making me too tall, Mia explained, not meeting his eyes, so I had to erase you lots of times. The words hung in the air like smoke. Graham's throat felt raw. Mia, are you going away? She asked suddenly, her green eyes finally meeting his. Like Tommy's daddy did? The question landed like a physical blow. Graham knew Tommy, the kid from Mia's class whose father had moved out last spring. He remembered Charlotte mentioning it, how Tommy had cried during recess, how Mia had given him her pudding cup. Mia, that's not, because if you are, she continued, her voice getting smaller. Can you at least play one game with me first? Before you go? Graham looked down at the drawing again, at the erased father, at the little girl who'd tried so hard to keep him in the picture that she'd worn holes in the paper. His phone buzzed again. Shanghai. The meeting. The divorce hearing scheduled for 10 a.m. But all he could see was his daughter's face, waiting for an answer she was afraid to hear. Graham Lockwood, who had closed billion-dollar deals without flinching, who had never missed a deadline in 20 years of business, reached for his phone. And for the first time in his life, he typed 3 words that would change everything. Cancel the meeting. Charlotte stood in the kitchen doorway, coffee mug frozen halfway to her lips, watching her husband sit cross-legged on their Persian rug playing Monopoly with their 8-year-old daughter. The same man who hadn't touched a board game in 6 years was now carefully counting out pink $50 bills. Daddy, you landed on my hotel, Mia squealed, bouncing on her knees. That's $800. Graham winced theatrically, making Mia giggle, a sound Charlotte had almost forgotten he could create. Highway robbery, he muttered, but his eyes were soft, focused entirely on their daughter's animated face. The grandfather clock chimed 8:30. Charlotte knew Graham should be reviewing quarterly reports by now, preparing for the Singapore conference call that controlled half their monthly revenue. Instead, he was arguing with a 3rd grader about whether Park Place was worth the investment. Mom, Mia called out, noticing Charlotte in the doorway. Daddy's losing. He bought all the railroads, but I got Boardwalk. Charlotte managed a smile, but her chest felt tight. This felt like watching a stranger wearing her husband's face. The Graham she knew would have calculated optimal property acquisition strategies, turned even monopoly into a business lesson. This man was letting their daughter bankrupt him while grinning about it. "Shouldn't you be getting ready for school, sweetheart?" Charlotte asked, glancing at the clock. "5 more minutes?" Graham asked, and Charlotte's breath caught. When was the last time he'd asked for more time with them instead of looking for ways to escape? Mia's face lit up. "Can we, Mommy? Daddy never plays games with me." The innocent honesty of it hit Charlotte like a slap. She looked at Graham, expecting to see guilt or defensiveness, but found something else entirely. Shame. Raw, honest shame that made her want to look away. 5 minutes, Charlotte whispered. Graham's phone buzzed on the coffee table. Then again, the display showed Dexter's name, followed by 3 missed calls from the Singapore office. Graham glanced at it, then deliberately turned the phone face down. "Your turn, princess," he said to Mia, as if billion-dollar deals were just background noise. Charlotte poured herself another cup of coffee, hands trembling slightly. This was the man she'd fallen in love with in that crowded journalism conference 12 years ago. The one who'd spent an entire evening helping her debug her laptop instead of networking with potential investors. The one who'd brought her coffee during late-night article deadlines, who'd slow danced with her in their tiny apartment kitchen to music from her phone. When had he disappeared? When had work swallowed him so completely that even she had stopped looking for him? "I win," Mia announced, throwing her arms up in victory. "Daddy's broke." Graham laughed, actually laughed, and the sound sent an unexpected warmth through Charlotte's chest. "Completely bankrupt," he agreed, ruffling Mia's hair. "You're a ruthless businesswoman. I learned from watching you," Mia said proudly, then paused. "But you never play with me to teach me stuff." The room went quiet. Graham's smile faltered. "I know, sweetheart," he said softly. "I'm sorry." Charlotte watched as Graham helped Mia pack up the game, his movements careful and deliberate, like he was trying to memorize every detail. When Mia ran upstairs to get dressed for school, Charlotte found herself alone with her husband for the first time in weeks, without lawyers or legal documents between them. "The Shanghai deal," she said quietly, "can wait. Graham, you've never—" "I know." He stood up, smoothing down his shirt. "I know exactly what I've never done, Charlotte. The list is longer than I thought." His phone buzzed again. This time, he picked it up and powered it off completely. Charlotte stared at him. "Who are you, and what did you do with my husband?" The question was meant to be light, maybe even teasing, but it came out broken instead. Because the truth was, she'd been asking herself that same question for years, except in reverse. Graham stepped closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne, the one she used to love. "I'm trying to figure that out myself." Before Charlotte could respond, Mia's voice rang down from upstairs. "Mommy, I can't find my lucky socks." The spell broke. Charlotte set down her mug and headed for the stairs, but Graham's voice stopped her. "Charlotte?" She turned. "After I dropped Mia at school," he said, his voice careful, uncertain. "Could we talk? Really talk?" Charlotte's heart hammered against her ribs. They hadn't really talked in so long that she wasn't sure she remembered how, but looking at him now, disheveled from sitting on the floor, phone powered off, asking instead of demanding, she found herself nodding. "Okay," she whispered. And as she climbed the stairs to help their daughter find lucky socks, Charlotte realized she was terrified. Because what if it was too late for talking? What if some bridges once burned couldn't be rebuilt? Charlotte sat across from Graham at their breakfast table, the same spot where they'd shared thousands of meals, but now it felt like sitting across from a stranger at a job interview. The morning light streaming through their bay window cast shadows between them, and she couldn't stop fidgeting with her wedding ring. Graham poured coffee into 2 mugs, hers with a splash of vanilla creamer, his black. The fact that he remembered how she liked it after months of eating breakfast at different times shouldn't have surprised her, but it did. "Mia was excited about the game," Charlotte said, testing the waters. "She's good at it, better than I was at her age." Graham's voice was careful, like he was walking on thin ice. "She gets that from you, the strategic thinking. She gets the ruthless part from you." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Fair enough." They fell into silence again. Charlotte studied his hands wrapped around the coffee mug, hands that used to trace her spine on Sunday mornings, that used to braid Mia's hair when she was little. When had she stopped noticing them? "I've been thinking," Graham began, then stopped. Started again. "About what you wrote." In the note, Charlotte's stomach clenched. Graham, you were right. The words came out rushed like he was afraid he'd lose courage. I did betray you. Every day I chose a conference call over dinner. Every night I brought my laptop to bed. Every weekend I told Mia, maybe later, and never meant it. Charlotte stared at him. In 11 years of marriage, she'd never heard him admit to being wrong about anything more serious than the quickest route to the grocery store. I used to watch you sleep, she said quietly, surprising herself. In those first years, I'd watch you sleep and think about how lucky I was. How did we get here, Graham? How did we become people who live in the same house but don't really know each other anymore? Graham set down his mug, and Charlotte noticed his hands were trembling slightly. I thought I was providing for you. For Mia. I thought if I could just close the next deal, expand to the next market, that somehow that would be enough, that you'd understand. Understand what? That I was doing it all for you. The words hung between them like a bridge neither was sure would hold their weight. But I never asked for any of it, Charlotte whispered. The second house in the Hamptons, the private school tuition, the designer clothes Mia doesn't even want to wear. I just wanted you to come home for dinner. I wanted you to know that Mia lost her first tooth last month, or that she's scared of the dark again, or that I started writing again. Just little pieces for the local paper. Nothing important. It is important, Graham interrupted, his voice sharp with something that sounded like pain. Everything about you is important, and I've been too blind to see it. Charlotte felt tears threatening. Then why did it take divorce papers to make you notice? Graham was quiet for a long moment, staring into his coffee like it might contain answers. When he looked up, his eyes were red-rimmed. Because I was scared, he admitted. Scared that if I slowed down, if I stopped working 18-hour days, you'd see that I'm not the man you married. That successful, confident guy who swept you off your feet at that conference. He was pretending. I've been pretending for so long that I forgot who I really was underneath it all. Charlotte's breath caught. Graham, I grew up poor, Charlotte. Really poor. You know that. But what you don't know is that every morning I wake up terrified it's all going to disappear. The company, the house, you, Mia, all of it. So I work harder, thinking if I just build the walls high enough, strong enough, nothing bad can get in. But I built them so high that I locked myself out of my own life. The tears came then, sliding down Charlotte's cheeks before she could stop them. This vulnerable, broken version of her husband was more real than anything she'd seen from him in years. You locked us out too, she whispered. I know. His voice cracked. God, Charlotte, I know. And I don't know if I can fix it. I don't know if I even know how to be the husband and father you both deserve. But I want to try. If you'll let me, I want to try. Charlotte reached across the table, her fingers brushing his knuckles. The touch was electric, familiar and foreign all at once. I'm scared too, she admitted. Scared that we've broken something that can't be fixed. Scared that I've forgotten how to love you the way I used to. Graham turned his hand palm up, letting her fingers settle into his. Then maybe we learn together. Maybe we figure out who we are now, instead of trying to go back to who we were. Charlotte looked at their intertwined hands, her wedding ring catching the morning light, his thumb tracing circles on her skin like he used to do during their first year of marriage. The divorce papers, she said softly. I'm not signing them. Graham, not yet. Not unless you tell me there's nothing left to fight for. Charlotte studied his face, seeing past the expensive haircut and the tailored shirt to the scared boy who'd worked 3 jobs to put himself through college, who'd told her on their third date that he wanted to give her the world. Maybe he'd tried to give her the whole world when all she'd wanted was his. There might be something left, she whispered. Graham's grip on her hand tightened. But I need to know this isn't just guilt, Graham. I need to know you're changing because you want this life, not because you're afraid of losing it. Graham nodded, understanding the weight of what she was asking. How do I prove that to you? Charlotte was quiet for a moment, then stood up, still holding his hand. Start by coming to Mia's school play next week. It's at 2 p.m. on Thursday. She's playing a sunflower. Graham's calendar was probably packed solid for the next month, Charlotte knew. Important meetings, crucial calls, deals that couldn't wait. But he didn't hesitate. I'll be there, he said. And for the first time in years, Charlotte thought he might actually mean it. Dexter Rawlings had worked for Graham Lockwood for 8 years, and he'd never seen his boss cook scrambled eggs. Yet here was the CEO of Lockwood International Shipping, sleeves rolled up, standing at the kitchen island at 7 a.m. on a Tuesday, carefully whisking eggs in a ceramic bowl while soft jazz played from Charlotte's old radio. Sir, Dexter ventured, clutching his tablet like a shield. The Tokyo investors are waiting on the conference line. They've been holding for 12 minutes. Graham didn't look up from the eggs. Tell them I'll call back in an hour. An hour? Dexter's voice cracked slightly. Sir, this is the Yamamoto deal. 18 months of negotiations. We'll still be there in an hour. Graham added a splash of milk to the eggs, the way he'd watched Charlotte do it countless times. Mia likes her eggs fluffy. Dexter stared at his boss like he'd announced plans to join the circus. In 8 years, Graham had never delayed a call, never mind for breakfast preparation. The man once took a conference call from his hospital bed during a bout with pneumonia. The soft patter of small feet on hardwood announced Mia's arrival. She appeared in the doorway wearing mismatched socks and a World's Best Daughter t-shirt that was slightly too big. Daddy? Her voice carried the same uncertainty Dexter felt. You're making breakfast? I'm trying to. Graham smiled at her, and something in Dexter's chest twisted. When was the last time he'd seen his boss smile without closing a deal first? Think you can teach me the right way to flip these without breaking them? Mia's face lit up like Christmas morning. She climbed onto the counter stool, and Graham handed her the spatula with the solemnity of passing along a family heirloom. Mommy says you have to be patient, Mia instructed seriously. And you can't flip too early or they get all messy. Good advice for a lot of things, Graham murmured, catching Charlotte's eye as she entered the kitchen. She paused in the doorway, taking in the scene. Her husband in his expensive shirt and tie, cooking breakfast while their daughter coached him through it. Her expression was unreadable, but Dexter noticed she didn't immediately reach for her coffee and retreat to her home office like usual. Morning, Charlotte said carefully. Morning, Graham replied, his voice softer than Dexter had ever heard it. Coffee's fresh? Charlotte poured herself a mug, her movements deliberate. Dexter, good morning. Mrs. Lockwood. Dexter nodded, still clutching his tablet. He'd been fielding increasingly frantic calls from 3 different time zones, but the domestic scene in front of him felt too fragile to interrupt. Graham's phone buzzed on the counter, then again, a third time. Mia looked at it, then at her father. Daddy, your phone. I know, Princess. Graham carefully flipped the eggs, following Mia's whispered instructions. But right now, breakfast is more important. The words hung in the kitchen air like smoke. Dexter felt like he was witnessing something monumental. The moment a man decided to choose differently. Perfect, Mia clapped as Graham successfully transferred the eggs to a plate. You did it. We did it, Graham corrected, ruffling her hair. I had an excellent teacher. Charlotte sipped her coffee, watching this unfamiliar version of her husband. Dexter, you look like you've seen a ghost. Something like that, Dexter admitted. Sir, should I reschedule your entire morning? Because after Tokyo, you have the board meeting, then the quarterly review with Singapore. Reschedule what you can, Graham said, sitting down next to Mia with his own plate. Move everything to after 10. Everything? Everything. Dexter made rapid notes on his tablet, mentally calculating the ripple effect of rearranging Graham's schedule. It would be chaos. Angry investors, confused partners, a dozen fires to put out. But looking at Mia's face as she shared her eggs with her father, telling him about her upcoming school play, Dexter found himself thinking it might be worth it. There's one more thing, Graham said, not looking up from cutting Mia's toast into triangles. Thursday at 2 p.m. Block it out permanently. Permanently? Dexter's pen hovered over his tablet. Mia's school play and any future school events, they take priority. Charlotte's coffee mug paused halfway to her lips. Mia bounced in her seat. Really, Daddy? You're really coming? Wouldn't miss it. Graham's voice was steady, certain. I want to see my sunflower shine. Mia threw her arms around his neck, nearly knocking over the orange juice. Graham caught the glass with one hand while hugging her back with the other. And for a moment, Dexter saw something he'd never witnessed in 8 years of working with Graham Lockwood. He saw a father. I should go get ready for school, Mia announced, sliding off her stool. Mrs. Henderson says we have to practice our lines every day. What's your line? Charlotte asked. Mia stood up straight, put her hands on her hips, and declared in the most serious voice an 8-year-old could muster, I grow toward the light, no matter how dark the storm gets. The words settled over the kitchen like a benediction. After Mia ran upstairs, the 3 adults sat in contemplative silence. Graham's phone buzzed again, but he didn't reach for it. The Tokyo deal really is important, Charlotte said quietly. So is this, Graham replied, gesturing to the breakfast dishes, the lingering warmth of their daughter's laughter. Charlotte studied his face. You're going to lose money today, probably a lot of it. Yeah, Graham picked up his coffee mug, hands steady. But I've been losing something more valuable for years without even noticing. Dexter cleared his throat. I should go make those calls. As he headed toward the door, he heard Charlotte's voice, soft and wondering. "Who are you, Graham Lockwood?" And Graham's reply, equally soft. "I'm trying to figure that out, but I think I might be Mia's dad. And your husband. Everything else is just details." Dexter stepped into the hall, pulling out his phone to begin the complicated dance of rearranging a billionaire's priorities. For the first time in 8 years, he was proud of his boss, even if it was going to be the most stressful morning of his professional life. The grocery store at 3 p.m. on a Wednesday was Charlotte's sanctuary. She'd discovered this years ago. The quiet hour when soccer moms had picked up their kids but hadn't started dinner prep, when the aisles were mostly empty except for retirees comparing cereal prices and the occasional harried parent grabbing forgotten lunch items. Charlotte pushed her cart slowly through the produce section, selecting apples with the methodical precision of someone who had nowhere urgent to be. For the first time in weeks, her mind wasn't racing with custody arrangements or legal documents. It was just her, the soft muzak, and the simple task of choosing whether to buy Gala or Honeycrisp. "Charlotte?" The voice made her freeze, hands suspended over a bag of oranges. She turned to find Marcus Thorne standing behind her, wearing scrubs and that same crooked smile that had once made her pulse quicken. "Marcus." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "Hi, Dr. Marcus Thorne, emergency room physician at Mercy General, the man who'd asked her out 6 months ago when she'd brought Mia in for a broken wrist, the man she'd almost said yes to. You look." He paused, studying her face with the careful attention that had made him such a good doctor. "You look different, better." Charlotte's hand moved unconsciously to her hair. She'd been taking more care with her appearance lately, though she wasn't sure why. Maybe it was Graham's renewed attention, or maybe she was just tired of feeling invisible. "Thanks." She shifted her grip on the cart handle. "How's the ER? Still saving lives and breaking hearts?" Marcus laughed, the sound warm and familiar. "Mostly just breaking hearts, mine included." His expression grew more serious. "Charlotte, I heard about the divorce proceedings. I'm sorry." The words hit her like cold water. Of course he'd heard. In a town like theirs, news traveled faster than gossip at a church potluck. "It's..." Charlotte started, then stopped. What was it? Complicated? On hold? In limbo while her husband tried to remember how to be present? Complicated, she finished lamely. Marcus nodded, understanding flickering in his dark eyes. "It always is. But for what it's worth, if you ever need someone to talk to, just talk. You know where to find me." Charlotte felt a familiar flutter in her chest, the same one she'd experienced 6 months ago when this kind, attentive man had looked at her like she was worth seeing. Marcus had been safety, a life raft in the storm of her failing marriage, someone who actually listened when she spoke, who remembered details about her life, who made her feel interesting again. "Marcus." "Mommy!" Mia's voice rang out across the produce section, followed by the sound of running feet. She appeared around the corner of the apple display, slightly out of breath, her backpack bouncing. "There you are. Daddy said you were getting groceries and we should come help because..." Mia stopped short when she saw Marcus. "Oh, hi, Dr. Thorne." "Hey there, Mia." Marcus smiled at her. "How's that wrist? Still giving you trouble?" Mia held up her arm, rotating it proudly. "All better. Daddy says I'm tougher than I look." "Your daddy's right." "Speaking of Daddy," Charlotte said carefully, "where is he?" "Parking the car." Mia bounced on her toes. "He left work early to come grocery shopping with us. Can you believe it? Daddy, grocery shopping." Charlotte's heart did something complicated, a skip that might have been hope, or might have been panic. "He did what now?" "I know, right?" Mia was practically vibrating with excitement. "And he said we could pick out stuff for dinner together like a real family does. He even asked what vegetables I wanted to try." Marcus's smile faltered slightly. "Well, that's wonderful, Mia." Charlotte heard footsteps approaching and turned to see Graham rounding the corner, loosening his tie as he walked. He looked harried, like he'd run from whatever meeting he'd cut short, but his eyes were bright with something that looked like determination. "Sorry, I couldn't find a parking." Graham stopped when he saw Marcus, his expression shifting to something more guarded. "Dr. Thorne, Mr. Lockwood." Marcus's voice was professionally neutral. "Good to see you." The three adults stood there for a moment, creating an awkward triangle, while Mia remained blissfully unaware of the undercurrent swirling around her. "Daddy," Mia announced. "Dr. Thorne fixed my arm when it was broken. Remember?" "I remember." Graham's voice was carefully controlled, but Charlotte caught the slight tension in his jaw. "We were very grateful. Just doing my job." Marcus said. He glanced between Charlotte and Graham, reading the room with the skill of someone used to navigating family dynamics in crisis. Well, I should let you folks get to your shopping. He started to turn away, then paused, looking directly at Charlotte. Take care of yourself, Charlotte. You deserve to be happy. The words hung in the air like a challenge as Marcus walked away, his footsteps echoing on the polished floor. Charlotte felt Graham's gaze on her, heavy and questioning. Friend of yours? He asked quietly. Someone I know, Charlotte replied, which was both true and completely inadequate. Mia, oblivious to the tension, grabbed Graham's hand. Come on, Daddy. You promised we could pick out ice cream together. As they walked toward the frozen foods section, Graham fell into step beside Charlotte, their cartwheels squeaking slightly. He seems nice, Graham said, his tone carefully neutral. He is. How well do you know him? Charlotte stopped walking, turning to face her husband. Graham, are you asking what I think you're asking? I don't know what I'm asking. Graham ran a hand through his hair, messing up his usually perfect styling. When he looked at you, I saw something, and I realized I haven't looked at you like that in years. The honesty of it took Charlotte's breath away. How did he look at me? Graham was quiet for a moment, watching Mia compare ice cream flavors with the intensity of a UN negotiator. Like you were the most interesting person in the room, he said finally. Like he was grateful just to be talking to you. Charlotte felt tears prick her eyes. Graham, I'm not accusing you of anything, he said quickly. I don't have the right to accuse you of anything. I'm starting to understand what I lost, what I've been losing. Mia bounded back to them, clutching a carton of mint chocolate chip. This one. Can we get this one? Whatever you want, princess, Graham said, but his eyes never left Charlotte's face. As they finished their shopping, Charlotte found herself watching Graham navigate this ordinary task with the focused attention he usually reserved for board meetings. He consulted the list she'd made, asked Mia's opinion on pasta shapes, even remembered that they were out of her favorite tea, but all she could think about was Marcus's words, "You deserve to be happy." The question that haunted her as they loaded groceries into Graham's car wasn't whether she deserved happiness. It was whether she could find it with a man who was just now learning how to see her again. The sound of gentle rain against their bedroom window used to be Charlotte's favorite lullaby. Now, lying in bed at 11 p.m. with Graham reading quarterly reports beside her, just like old times, the rhythm felt more like a countdown. 3 days until Mia's school play. 3 days until Charlotte would see if Graham's transformation was real or just an elaborate performance of his own. Charlotte? Graham's voice was soft in the lamplight. What was I like? When we first met. The question caught her off guard. She set down her book, a romance novel she'd been pretending to read, and turned to study his profile. Even in the warm light, she could see the lines around his eyes that hadn't been there 12 years ago, the silver threading through his dark hair. You really want to know? I need to know. Charlotte was quiet for a moment, remembering. You were intense, but not the way you are now. It was different, focused, but on people instead of profit margins. She shifted onto her side, facing him fully. You listened to everything I said like you were taking notes for a test. You asked about my articles, my dreams, my childhood dog. You made me feel like I was the most fascinating person you'd ever met. You were, Graham said quietly, setting aside his papers. You still are. But you stopped seeing it. I stopped seeing a lot of things. The rain picked up, drumming harder against the glass. Charlotte pulled the comforter up to her chin, suddenly feeling exposed. Graham, what happened to us? Really? Because I've been thinking about it for months and I can't pinpoint the exact moment we stopped being us. Graham was quiet for so long that Charlotte thought he might not answer. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Do you remember our 3rd anniversary? I was closing the Peterson deal, my first really big contract. I promised I'd be home by 7 for dinner. Charlotte's chest tightened. She remembered. You had made reservations at that little Italian place downtown. You bought a new dress, blue, with tiny flowers on it. You remember the dress? I remember everything about that night, especially the look on your face when I walked in at 11 p.m. Graham turned to face her, his eyes dark with regret. You didn't say anything. You just smiled and heated up my dinner and asked how the meeting went. Charlotte's throat felt tight. You were so excited about the deal, and you were so understanding, so patient, so willing to forgive. Graham's voice cracked slightly. I think that's when I learned the lesson that destroyed us. What lesson? That you would always be there, no matter how badly I prioritized everything else. That your love was unconditional, so I could take it for granted. He reached out tentatively, his fingers brushing her cheek. I was wrong. The touch sent electricity through Charlotte's skin, a reminder of how her body used to respond to him, how it still wanted to respond to him. I stopped fighting for us, she admitted. Somewhere along the way, I stopped asking you to come home. I stopped waiting up. I just adapted, built a life that worked around your absence. With Mia. Charlotte's voice grew stronger. She became my everything because she was all I had. And maybe that wasn't fair to her either, making her responsible for my happiness. Graham's thumb traced along her cheekbone, a gesture so familiar it made her heart ache. I saw how he looked at you today, he said quietly. Dr. Thorne. Charlotte's breath caught. Graham, I'm not angry. I can't be angry, because he looked at you the way I should have been looking at you all along. Graham's eyes searched her face. Are you in love with him? The question hung between them like a bridge they were both afraid to cross. No, Charlotte whispered. But I thought about it. For a while, I thought about what it would be like to be with someone who actually saw me. Someone who asked about my day and meant it. Someone who remembered that I existed. Graham flinched as if she'd slapped him. I thought about leaving you for him, Charlotte continued, the words tumbling out like a confession. Not because I loved him, but because he represented everything you weren't giving me. Attention, interest, presence. Why didn't you? Charlotte looked at this man she'd married, this stranger who was trying to become familiar again. Because leaving for the wrong reasons wouldn't have been any better than staying for the wrong reasons. Graham moved closer, close enough that she could feel his warmth through their pajamas. And now? What are your reasons now? I don't know yet, she said honestly. I know I love you. I never stopped loving you. But I don't know if love is enough to fix what we broke. What if I told you I was falling in love with you all over again? The words hit Charlotte like a physical force. What? These past few days watching you with Mia, seeing you laugh at breakfast, noticing the way you bite your lip when you're thinking, it's like meeting you for the first time again. Except now I know how much I have to lose. Charlotte felt tears threatening. Graham, I know it's not enough. I know I have to prove it's real. But Charlotte, for the first time in years, I'm not thinking about the next deal or the next expansion. I'm thinking about tomorrow morning and whether you'll let me make you coffee. I'm thinking about Thursday afternoon and how proud I'm going to be watching our daughter shine on that stage. The rain had gentled to a soft patter, and in the quiet Charlotte could hear her own heartbeat. I'm scared, she whispered. Of what? Of believing you. Of letting myself hope again. She met his eyes. Of falling in love with this version of you, only to have the old Graham come back once the guilt wears off. Graham's hand cupped her face fully now, his thumb wiping away a tear she didn't realize had fallen. Then don't fall in love with me yet, he said softly. Just give me a chance to earn it. Give me a chance to prove that this isn't guilt or fear or desperation. Give me a chance to show you that I'm finally awake. Charlotte studied his face in the lamplight, the face she'd loved for 11 years, the face that had become a stranger, the face that was trying to become home again. Okay, she whispered. Okay? I won't fall in love with you yet, she said, a small smile playing at her lips. But I'll give you a chance to change my mind. Graham's answering smile was like sunrise after the longest night. And as they settled into sleep, closer than they'd been in months but not quite touching, Charlotte found herself thinking that maybe, just maybe, some bridges could be rebuilt after all, even if it meant starting with a single plank at a time. The phone call came at 6:47 a.m., shattering the fragile peace they'd been building. Charlotte was in the kitchen, humming softly while she packed Mia's lunch when Graham's phone erupted in urgent buzzing from the counter. She glanced at the screen. Yamamoto Industries. Urgent. Graham appeared in the doorway, hair still damp from his shower, tie hanging loose around his neck. His eyes went immediately to the phone, and Charlotte watched something shift in his expression, that familiar tension creeping back into his shoulders. It's probably nothing, he said, but his hand was already reaching for the device. Graham. Charlotte's voice was quiet, but it stopped him mid-reach. You promised Mia you'd drive her to school today. I know, The phone stopped ringing, then immediately started again. Graham's jaw tightened. It's the Tokyo deal. Something must have gone wrong. Something always goes wrong. The words came out sharper than Charlotte intended, and she saw Graham flinch. The phone fell silent, then buzzed with a text notification. Then another. Charlotte, this is important. And we're not? The question hung between them like a familiar ghost. How many times had they stood in this exact spot, having this exact argument? How many promises had been broken at this kitchen counter? Mia's voice drifted down from upstairs. "Daddy, are you still taking me to school?" Graham looked toward the ceiling, then at his buzzing phone, then at Charlotte's face. She could see the war playing out behind his eyes. 11 years of ingrained habits battling against 3 days of new promises. "Take the call," Charlotte said quietly. "Charlotte, take it. I'll drive Mia. That's not what I want. But it's what you're going to do." Charlotte's voice was flat, resigned. "Because this is who you are, Graham. This is who you've always been." Graham's phone started ringing again. This time it was Dexter's number. "I could ignore it," Graham said, but his hand was trembling slightly. Charlotte had seen that tremor before, the physical manifestation of Graham's anxiety when business crises went unmanaged. "Could you? Really?" Charlotte wiped her hands on a dish towel, her movements deliberate and controlled. "Or would you spend the entire drive to Mia's school thinking about this call? Would you be present with her? Or would you be mentally crafting emails and calculating losses?" The accuracy of her assessment hit Graham like a physical blow, because she was right. Even now, part of his mind was racing through possibilities. What could have gone wrong with Yamamoto? How much money might be at stake? What fires needed immediate extinguishing? "I'm trying to change," he said weakly. "I know you are." Charlotte's voice softened, but the sadness in it was devastating. But trying and succeeding aren't the same thing. The phone stopped ringing, started again. "Daddy?" Mia appeared in the kitchen doorway, backpack slung over her shoulder, face bright with expectation. "Ready to go?" Graham looked at his daughter, really looked at her. 8 years old, still young enough to believe her father's promises meant something, still hopeful enough to expect him to choose her over a conference call. "Mia, sweetheart," Charlotte began. "Daddy has an important—" "No." Graham's voice was firm. He reached for his phone, and Charlotte's heart sank. But instead of answering, he powered it off completely. "No, I don't." He looked at Charlotte, his eyes clear and determined. The world managed to turn for thousands of years before Graham Lockwood existed. It can handle a few more hours. Mia bounced on her toes. "Really? You're really taking me?" "Really?" Graham slipped his phone into his pocket and grabbed his car keys. "But I have one condition." "What?" "You have to tell me about this boy Tommy you mentioned. The one who gave you his pudding cup at lunch yesterday." Mia's cheeks turned pink. "Daddy, I'm serious. Any boy giving my daughter pudding cups needs to be thoroughly investigated." Charlotte watched them head toward the garage, Graham's hand gentle on Mia's shoulder as she protested his teasing. For a moment, her heart lifted. Maybe he really was changing. Maybe. The house phone rang. Charlotte stared at it, knowing with absolute certainty who it would be. Dexter, probably. Or someone from the Tokyo office. Or any of a dozen people who expected Graham Lockwood to be available 24 hours a day. She let it ring. But 20 minutes later, when Graham's cell phone, left forgotten on the counter, buzzed with a text from Dexter that she couldn't help but see, her brief hope crumbled. Tokyo deal collapsed. Yamamoto pulled out. "Need you ASAP." "This is bad, Graham, really bad." Charlotte sank into a kitchen chair, staring at the message. 18 months of work. Millions of dollars. The kind of loss that would normally send Graham into crisis mode for weeks. And he didn't even know. When Graham returned 40 minutes later, whistling softly and looking more relaxed than she'd seen him in months, Charlotte felt sick. "Mia was so excited," he said, hanging up his keys. "She made me promise to sit in the front row Thursday. Apparently sunflowers need good lighting to shine properly." "Graham," something in her tone made him stop mid-smile. "What's wrong?" Charlotte held up his phone, the message still glowing on the screen. Graham's face went white. He took the phone with hands that weren't quite steady, reading the message once, twice, 3 times. 18 months, he whispered. "I know. $60 million. I know." Graham sank into the chair across from her, his phone clattering onto the table. "I could have prevented this if I'd taken the call, if I'd been available." "You don't know that." "Yes, I do." Graham's voice was hollow. "This is what happens when I try to be someone I'm not. This is what happens when I pretend that choosing breakfast over business is anything more than expensive fantasy." Charlotte's heart broke watching him spiral, watching him retreat into the familiar patterns of self-recrimination and work obsession that had defined their marriage. "So what now?" she asked quietly. Graham looked up at her, his eyes already distant, already calculating. "Now I fix it. However long it takes, whatever it costs. I fix it." And Mia's play? Graham's silence was answer enough. Charlotte nodded, understanding flooding through her like cold water. This was the moment she'd been waiting for. The inevitable return of the man who chose deals over dinner, profit over presents, everything else over them. I see. She stood up, smoothing down her shirt with hands that barely trembled. Well, at least now I know. Charlotte, wait. Know what, Graham? That when push comes to shove, you'll always choose work. That your promises mean nothing when there's money on the line. That I was right to file those divorce papers. The words hung in the air like smoke after an explosion. Graham stared at her, his phone still clutched in his hand, the weight of 11 years of the same choice pressing down on both of them. I don't know how to be both, he said finally, his voice broken. I don't know how to be the father and husband you need and still be the man who can provide for this family. Charlotte looked at him, this brilliant, driven, fundamentally broken man she'd loved for more than a decade. Maybe that's the problem, Graham. Maybe you never learned that we never needed you to provide everything. We just needed you to be here. She walked toward the door, then paused. The play is Thursday at 2. Mia will look for you in the front row. Try not to disappoint her again. And with that, Charlotte left Graham alone in their kitchen, surrounded by the ruins of another broken promise, and the phone that would always matter more than they did. Graham didn't come home that night. Charlotte sat at their kitchen table until 2 a.m., listening to the house settle around her, checking her phone for messages that never came. She'd made Mia's favorite dinner, grilled cheese and tomato soup, and watched their daughter's face fall when Daddy's chair stayed empty. He's fixing something important, Charlotte had explained, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. He's always fixing something important, Mia had replied with the devastating honesty only children possessed. Now, in the pre-dawn darkness, Charlotte finally understood what her marriage had become. A series of explanations for an absent father, a collection of excuses for a husband who chose everything else over them. The front door opened at 6:15 a.m. Graham appeared in the kitchen doorway looking like he'd slept in his office, which he probably had. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair disheveled, his eyes bloodshot with the particular exhaustion that came from fighting losing battles all night. Charlotte. His voice was hoarse. I can explain. Can you? Charlotte didn't look up from her coffee mug. Because I've been sitting here for 6 hours and I can't think of a single explanation that would make this okay. Graham moved closer, his footsteps careful on the hardwood floor. The Tokyo situation was worse than I thought. Yamamoto didn't just pull out. They're claiming breach of contract. They want damages, 50 million in penalties plus... Stop. The word came out so quietly Graham almost missed it. Just stop, Graham, please. But you don't understand. I understand perfectly. Charlotte finally looked up, and Graham stepped back at the devastation in her eyes. I understand that there will always be another crisis, another deal falling apart, another fire that only you can put out. This is different. No, it's not. Charlotte stood up, her movement sharp with controlled anger. Do you know what Mia asked me last night when you didn't come home? Graham's throat tightened. What? She asked if you were ever coming back. Not tonight. Ever. Charlotte's voice cracked. Our 8-year-old daughter asked me if her father was gone forever because you disappeared to handle a business crisis. The words hit Graham like physical blows. I would never. Wouldn't you? Because from where I'm standing, you already have. You've been disappearing piece by piece for years, and last night was just the final vanishing act. Graham sank into a kitchen chair, his expensive suit wrinkled and meaningless. Charlotte, I saved the deal. I managed to restructure the contract with Yamamoto. The penalties are down to 20 million and we keep the shipping routes. I fixed it. Congratulations. Charlotte's voice was flat. You saved $50 million. Too bad you lost your family in the process. That's not fair. Fair? Charlotte laughed, but there was no humor in it. You want to talk about fair? Fair would have been you coming home last night to eat dinner with your daughter. Fair would have been you calling to explain where you were. Fair would have been you remembering that we exist when the business world gets complicated. Graham looked around their kitchen, at the cold dinner plate still stacked by the sink, at Mia's school art projects covering the refrigerator, at the coffee mug Charlotte had set out for him that sat untouched and cold. I didn't know how to be both, he said finally. Both what? The man who saves million-dollar deals and the man who makes it home for dinner. The CEO who keeps this company running, and the father who shows up to school plays. Graham's voice was broken. I thought I had to choose. So you chose the money. I chose what I was good at. Graham looked up at her, his eyes raw. Charlotte, I'm good at business. I'm good at solving problems and closing deals and making impossible things work. But being a husband, being a father, I'm terrible at it. I don't know how to be what you need." Charlotte stared at him, seeing past the expensive suit to the scared boy underneath. "Do you know what we needed, Graham? We needed you to try. Not to be perfect, not to fix everything, just to try. To show up, to be present." Her voice softened, but the sadness in it was devastating. "We needed you to care more about us than you cared about being good at everything else." The sound of small feet on the stairs interrupted them. Mia appeared in the doorway, still in her pajamas, hair sleep-mussed, clutching her favorite stuffed elephant. "Daddy?" Her voice was small, uncertain. "You're home." Graham's face crumpled. "Hi, Princess. I waited for you last night for dinner." Mia's words were matter-of-fact, but they cut deeper than any accusation. "Mommy said you were working." "I was, sweetheart. There was a problem that needed. There's always a problem." Mia's interruption was gentle but devastating. "Mrs. Peterson says some daddies have jobs that are more important than their families." The words hung in the kitchen air like smoke. "Mrs. Peterson is wrong," Graham said quietly, kneeling down to Mia's level. "Nothing is more important than you and Mommy. Nothing. Then why are you always gone?" The question, asked with the devastating innocence of childhood, broke something fundamental in Graham's chest. "Because I'm scared," he admitted, the words coming out raw and honest. "I'm scared that if I'm not working all the time, something bad will happen, that we'll lose everything, that you and Mommy won't have what you need." Mia studied his face with the serious attention she usually reserved for difficult math problems. "Daddy, what I need is for you to watch me be a sunflower tomorrow." Graham closed his eyes, feeling the weight of every choice he'd made pressing down on him. "Mia, about tomorrow, don't." Charlotte's voice was sharp. "Don't you dare tell her you're not coming. The Yamamoto situation isn't resolved. There are conference calls scheduled, legal documents to review. Then cancel them. Charlotte, you don't understand how business works. And you don't understand how families work." Charlotte's composure finally cracked. "You think love is something you earn by providing. You think being a good father means paying for private school and dance lessons and college funds. But love isn't transactional, Graham. Presence isn't optional." Mia looked between her parents, her young face troubled by emotions she couldn't name. "Are you getting divorced?" she asked quietly. The question stopped everything. Graham and Charlotte stared at their daughter, this small person who'd been watching their marriage crumble with the helpless awareness of a child who understood more than they'd realized. "Sweetheart," Charlotte began, "because Jenny's parents got divorced and her daddy moved to an apartment and only sees her on weekends now." Mia's voice was getting smaller. "And Tommy's daddy doesn't live with them anymore either." Graham reached for his daughter's hand, his own trembling slightly. "Mia, I love you and Mommy more than anything in the world. But you're not happy," Mia said with devastating clarity. "None of us are happy anymore." The truth of it hit them all like cold water. Graham looked at Charlotte, then at Mia, then at the kitchen where they'd shared thousands of meals but somehow forgotten how to be a family. "You're right," he said quietly. "We're not happy, and that's my fault." He stood up, his decision crystallizing with the clarity that had made him successful in business, except this time, he was applying it to something infinitely more important. "Mia, what time is your play tomorrow?" 2:00. "I'll be there. Front row like I promised." "But Daddy, your work—" "My work will wait." Graham's voice was firm, certain, "because you were right. What you need is for me to watch you be a sunflower, and what I need is to remember how to be your father." Charlotte watched this exchange, her heart caught between hope and heartbreak, because she'd heard this promise before. The question was whether this time, Graham finally meant it. Thursday morning arrived with the weight of Judgment Day. Graham sat in his home office at 5 a.m., staring at his computer screen where 17 urgent emails blinked like accusatory eyes. The Yamamoto crisis had spawned 3 new emergencies overnight: a shipping delay in Singapore, a contract dispute in Hamburg, and a regulatory issue in Los Angeles that could cost them their largest client. His phone had been buzzing since 4:30 a.m. "This is who you are," a voice whispered in his head. "This is what you're good at. This is what matters." But then he heard it, the soft sound of Mia practicing her lines in her bedroom down the hall. "I grow toward the light no matter how dark the storm gets." Her voice was clear, confident, ready for her moment to shine, and she was counting on him to be there to see it. Graham's finger hovered over his phone. One call to Dexter, and he could spend the morning putting out fires. One conference call with Singapore, and he could prevent a disaster that might take months to fix. Instead, he powered off his computer. At 7 a.m., Charlotte found him in the kitchen making pancakes from scratch, wearing the apron Mia had given him for Father's Day 2 years ago, the one that said, "World's Okayest Dad" in crayon letters. "You're up early," she said carefully. "Couldn't sleep." Graham flipped a pancake with more concentration than the task required. "Thought I'd make Mia's favorite breakfast. You know, for luck." Charlotte poured herself coffee, studying his profile. There were dark circles under his eyes, tension lines around his mouth, but his hands were steady as he worked. "The phone's been ringing," she observed. "I know. Aren't you going to answer it?" Graham met her eyes. "Not today." Something in his voice made Charlotte's breath catch. This wasn't the desperate promise-making of the past few days. This was something quieter, more resolved. "Graham, if this is just guilt..." "It's not guilt." He turned to face her fully. "It's choice. For the first time in 11 years, I'm choosing consciously instead of just reacting." Mia bounced into the kitchen, already dressed in her school clothes. Her sunflower costume carefully hung over her arm. "Daddy, you made pancakes." "Had to fuel up my favorite sunflower," Graham said, ruffling her hair. "Big performance today. Are you really coming?" The question was asked lightly, but Charlotte heard the underlying uncertainty. "Front row, center seat," Graham promised. "I already asked Mrs. Henderson to save it for me." Mia's face lit up like Christmas. "Really? You called my teacher?" "Yesterday afternoon. Told her I needed the best view in the house to watch my daughter shine." Charlotte stared at him. Graham had called Mia's teacher. When had he even learned Mrs. Henderson's name? The drive to school was different than their usual rushed mornings. Graham drove slowly, asking Mia about her costume, her lines, her friends in the play. He walked her to the classroom door, kissed her forehead, and whispered something that made her giggle. On the way home, Charlotte couldn't stay quiet anymore. "What's happening here, Graham?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, what's really happening? Because this feels different. You feel different." Graham was quiet for several blocks, navigating the morning traffic with unusual patience. "Do you remember what you said the night we decided to have a baby?" he finally asked. Charlotte's breath caught. "We were lying in bed after that dinner with your parents. You said you wanted to be the kind of father you never had. I said I wanted to be present, available, the dad who showed up." Graham's voice was thick with emotion. "And then I became exactly what I swore I'd never be. Absent, distracted, a provider instead of a parent. Graham, I thought about that all night. About the man I promised to be and the man I became. About what Mia said, that none of us are happy anymore." He pulled into their driveway but didn't get out. "Charlotte, I can't undo 11 years of wrong choices, but I can make the right choice today. And tomorrow? Next week? When the next crisis hits?" Graham turned to look at her and Charlotte saw something in his eyes she hadn't seen in years. "Peace. Then I'll make the right choice again. And again. Until choosing you and Mia becomes as automatic as breathing." "What about the business?" "The business will survive or it won't. But Mia will only be 8 years old once. She'll only have one chance to look out at that audience and see her father cheering her on." Charlotte felt tears threatening. "Graham, you could lose millions of dollars today. I've already lost something worth more than money." Graham's voice was quiet but certain. "I've lost years with my daughter. I've lost my wife's trust. I've lost pieces of myself I'm not sure I can get back. But today, maybe I can stop losing and start finding instead." At 1:45 p.m., Graham sat in the front row of Madison Elementary's multi-purpose room, wearing his best suit but with his tie loosened and his phone buried deep in his pocket. Charlotte slid into the seat beside him 5 minutes later, surprised to find him already there. "You're early," she said. "Didn't want to miss anything." Graham's eyes were fixed on the makeshift stage. "Did you know Mia's been practicing her lines every night for 3 weeks? She told me this morning. 3 weeks and I never heard her once." "You were working late." "I was choosing to work late," Graham corrected. "There's a difference." The lights dimmed, and a cluster of first graders dressed as various garden plants took the stage. Mia stood tall in her yellow sunflower costume, her face bright with excitement. When the spotlight found her and she delivered her line, "I grow toward the light no matter how dark the storm gets." Graham felt something break open in his chest. His daughter was luminous, confident, perfect, and he was there to see it. During intermission, Graham's phone buzzed in his pocket. Once, twice, 3 times. Charlotte watched his face, waiting for the familiar tension, the itch to check his messages, the inevitable excuse about stepping outside for just one quick call. Instead, Graham reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and handed it to her. "Would you mind holding this?" he asked. "I don't want anything to interrupt the second act." Charlotte stared at the phone in her hands. This device that had been Graham's lifeline, his addiction, his excuse for 11 years. "Graham, are you sure?" "I'm sure." He took her hand, intertwining their fingers. "The most important thing in my world is about to sing a song about growing toward the light. Everything else can wait." As the second act began and Mia's voice rang out clear and sweet across the small auditorium, Charlotte felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Real, fragile, terrifying hope that maybe, just maybe, they could find their way back to each other. And in the front row of their daughter's school play, with Graham's hand warm in hers and his phone silent in her purse, Charlotte allowed herself to believe that some promises might actually be kept after all. The applause was still echoing when Mia spotted them in the front row. Her face transformed, from the serious concentration of a young performer to the pure joy of a daughter whose father had kept his word. She waved so enthusiastically that her sunflower petals rustled, and Graham felt his throat close with emotion he'd forgotten how to name. "Daddy, Mommy, did you see me?" "We saw you, Princess," Graham called back, his voice carrying across the small auditorium. "You were magnificent." Other parents began filing out, collecting programs and children, but Graham remained seated, watching Mia accept congratulations from her classmates. Charlotte started to stand, but he caught her hand. "Wait," he said quietly. "I need to say something." Charlotte sank back into her chair, studying his profile. "Graham, I know what you're thinking." His eyes never left Mia, who was now helping a kindergartner untangle his carrot costume. "You're thinking this was easy because it was one afternoon. You're wondering what happens tomorrow when the real world comes crashing back." Charlotte's silence confirmed his accuracy. "You're right to wonder," Graham continued, "because sitting here, watching our daughter shine, is the easiest choice I've made in years. The hard choices come later. At 6 a.m. when Singapore calls with a crisis. At midnight when Hamburg needs contract revisions. When choosing this, choosing us costs me deals and money and the respect of people who think family is a luxury successful men can't afford. So what are you saying?" Graham turned to face her fully, and Charlotte saw something in his eyes that took her breath away. Not the desperate pleading of recent days, but something deeper, settled. "Sure. I'm saying I choose this anyway." His voice was steady, certain. "I choose watching school plays over conference calls. I choose bedtime stories over quarterly reports. I choose being Mia's father and your husband over being Graham Lockwood, CEO." "Graham, you can't just—" "Yes, I can." He smiled, and it was the first truly peaceful smile she'd seen from him in years. "Charlotte, do you know what I realized sitting here today?" She shook her head. "I realized I've been living my entire adult life in fear. Fear of being poor again. Fear of not being enough. Fear that if I stopped running on the hamster wheel for even a moment, everything would collapse." Graham's voice grew stronger, but watching Mia up there, seeing how proud she was that we were here, I realized the only thing that's been collapsing is us, and that's infinitely more valuable than any business deal. Charlotte felt tears threatening. "What about the company? Your father's legacy? My father's legacy?" Graham laughed, but there was no bitterness in it. "My father worked himself to death by 55 and barely knew his own children. If that's his legacy, then I'm choosing to build a different one. And if you lose everything, then we'll figure it out together." Graham's hand tightened on hers. "Charlotte, I've spent 11 years trying to give you and Mia the world, but what I never understood is that you already were my world. I just kept running too fast to notice." Mia bounded over to them then, still glowing with post-performance excitement, her sunflower costume slightly askew. "Did you really like it, Daddy? Really, really?" Graham scooped her into his arms, costume and all. "Really, really, really. You were the brightest sunflower I've ever seen. Mrs. Henderson said my daddy was the only one who called to ask for the best seat," Mia announced proudly. "She said that meant you really, really wanted to come." "I really, really did," Graham confirmed, his voice thick with emotion. As they walked to the car together, Graham carrying Mia, Charlotte walking beside them, Charlotte felt the strangest sensation. For the first time in years, they felt like a family again. Not perfect, not without problems, but real. "Ice cream?" Graham suggested as they reached the parking lot. "I think exceptional sunflowers deserve exceptional celebration." "It's 3:30 on a Thursday," Charlotte pointed out automatically. And, Charlotte paused, realizing she couldn't think of a single reason why exceptional sunflowers shouldn't have ice cream at 3:30 on a Thursday. And nothing. Ice cream sounds perfect. At the ice cream shop, while Mia debated between chocolate chip and strawberry with the seriousness of a UN negotiator, Graham's phone buzzed in Charlotte's purse. "Your phone," she said, starting to hand it to him. Graham looked at the device, then at Mia's animated face as she described the merits of various flavors to the patient teenager behind the counter. "Let it ring," he said simply. "Graham, it could be important. It is important. It's just not more important than this." Charlotte stared at him. This man who'd answered conference calls during their anniversary dinner, who'd checked emails during Christmas morning, who'd chosen deals over everything for so long she'd forgotten he knew how to choose differently. "Who are you?" she whispered. "I'm Mia's father," Graham said simply. "I'm your husband. And for the first time in years, that's enough for me." Mia returned with her ice cream, a compromise of chocolate chip and strawberry swirl, and settled between her parents in the booth. As she chattered about the play, her friends, her teacher's reaction to Graham being there, Charlotte watched her husband's face. He was present. Completely, utterly present. Not checking his watch, not glancing at his phone, not mentally composing emails. Just there, laughing at their daughter's stories, asking follow-up questions, being exactly what Mia had always needed him to be. "Daddy," Mia said suddenly, her spoon pausing halfway to her mouth. "Are you and Mommy going to stay married?" The question came out of nowhere, hitting both adults like cold water. Graham looked at Charlotte, then at Mia, then reached across the table to take Charlotte's hand. "That depends," he said carefully, "on whether Mommy thinks I can really change. Whether she believes I can be the husband she deserves." Mia looked between them with the serious expression she wore when solving difficult problems. "Mommy, do you love Daddy?" The question was simple, but the answer felt impossibly complex. Did she love the man who'd disappeared into his work for 11 years? Did she love the stranger who'd been trying so hard to find his way back? Did she love the person sitting across from her now, present and peaceful and completely focused on their family? "Yes," Charlotte whispered, the word surprising her with its certainty. "I do love Daddy. And Daddy, do you love Mommy?" "More than anything in the world," Graham said without hesitation. "Then why is this hard?" Mia asked with devastating 8-year-old logic. "If you love each other, why can't you just love each other?" Charlotte and Graham stared at their daughter, then at each other, and suddenly both of them were laughing. Not the bitter laughter of people who'd lost their way, but the surprised laughter of people who'd just been handed the simplest truth by the wisest person they knew. "You know what, Princess?" Graham said, still chuckling. "You're absolutely right." He turned to Charlotte, his expression growing serious again. "Charlotte Elizabeth Lockwood, I love you. I've loved you for 12 years, even when I was too stupid and scared to show it properly. I love your intelligence, your kindness, your patience with a man who didn't deserve it. I love the way you make our daughter feel safe and seen and valued. I love the life we built together, even though I nearly destroyed it." Charlotte's breath caught. "I can't promise I'll be perfect," Graham continued. "I can't promise I won't mess up or struggle or occasionally forget to put you first. But I can promise I'll try. Every day I'll choose you and Mia over everything else. Because you're not just my family, you're my home." Charlotte looked at this man who'd been a stranger in her house for so long, seeing clearly for the first time in years the person she'd fallen in love with at that journalism conference. "Graham Lockwood," she said softly, "I choose you too." And there, in a small ice cream shop on a Thursday afternoon, while their daughter applauded and other customers pretended not to watch, Charlotte and Graham found their way back to each other, not through grand gestures or expensive therapy or dramatic proclamations, but through the simple, revolutionary act of being present for the love that had been waiting patiently for them to come home. 6 months later, the sound of laughter echoed through the backyard on a crisp October afternoon. Charlotte stood at the kitchen window, dish towel in her hands, watching Graham and Mia work together in the small garden they'd planted last spring. Their daughter, now 9 and missing her 2 front teeth, was explaining with great seriousness why pumpkins needed more space than carrots, while Graham nodded with the concentrated attention he used to reserve for board meetings. 6 months had changed everything and nothing. Graham still woke up at 5 a.m., but now he spent that quiet hour reading instead of checking emails. He still ran Lockwood International, but he'd hired 2 vice presidents and learned the revolutionary concept of delegation. Most importantly, he still came home every evening, sometimes earlier than planned, never later than promised. "Mommy," Mia called from the garden. "Come see how big our sunflowers got." Charlotte stepped outside, pulling her cardigan closer against the autumn air. The sunflowers they'd planted after Mia's school play had grown tall and proud, their faces following the sun across the sky throughout the summer. "They're beautiful, sweetheart," Charlotte said, wrapping her arms around Mia from behind. "Daddy says next year we should plant a whole field of them," Mia announced, "so we can have sunflower festivals and invite the whole neighborhood." Charlotte caught Graham's eye over their daughter's head, sharing a smile. This was new. Graham making plans that extended beyond the next quarterly report, imagining futures that involved communities and celebrations rather than just profit margins. "A sunflower festival sounds wonderful," Charlotte agreed. Graham stood up, brushing dirt from his jeans. Actual jeans, not the pressed khakis he used to consider casual wear. His hair was mussed. His shirt had a small tear from wrestling with tomato vines, and Charlotte thought he'd never looked more handsome. "I have an idea," he said, that familiar gleam in his eye that used to signal a new business venture. "What if we cooked dinner together tonight, all three of us? Make it a whole production." "You want to cook?" Charlotte raised an eyebrow. "You, who once burned water trying to make instant coffee?" "Hey, I've been practicing. Dexter gave me a cookbook for executives who want to actually feed their families instead of just ordering takeout." Mia bounced on her toes. "Can we make spaghetti? With the really long noodles that you have to twirl?" "We can make anything you want, princess." As they headed inside, Charlotte noticed Graham's phone sitting forgotten on the garden bench, screen dark and silent. 3 months ago, that phone would have been surgically attached to his hand. Now it often went hours without being checked. The change hadn't been immediate or perfect. There had been moments of backsliding, nights when old habits tried to resurface, difficult conversations about boundaries and priorities. But each time, Graham had chosen differently, not dramatically, not with grand pronouncements, but with quiet, consistent decisions that added up to a completely different life. "You know what I realized today?" Graham said as they entered the kitchen, Mia running ahead to wash her hands. "What's that?" "I used to think success meant building something bigger every year. More clients, more revenue, more expansion." He leaned against the counter, watching Mia carefully arrange ingredients for their dinner adventure. "But watching Mia grow taller, seeing you smile more, feeling like I actually belong in my own house, this is what success feels like." Charlotte moved closer to him, close enough to see the gold flecks in his brown eyes that she'd fallen in love with 12 years ago. "Any regrets?" she asked softly. Graham considered the question seriously, the way he approached everything now, with thoughtfulness instead of immediate reaction. "I regret how long it took me to figure it out," he said finally. "I regret the years I missed, the moments I can't get back. But regret about choosing this life, about choosing you and Mia every single day?" He shook his head. "Never. Even when the Hamburg office called you 17 times last Tuesday about the shipping crisis. Even then." Graham grinned. "Do you know what I told them? I'm afraid to ask. I told them that my daughter had a soccer game, and crises would have to wait until after I'd cheered her on from the sidelines. Dexter nearly had a heart attack." Charlotte laughed, remembering the frantic texts from Graham's assistant that evening. How did they handle it without the great Graham Lockwood swooping in to save the day? Turns out they handled it just fine. Amazing how capable people become when you're not hovering over them, trying to control every decision. "Daddy," Mia called from the sink. "I'm ready to be your sous chef." "On my way, head chef Mia." As Graham moved to help their daughter, Charlotte pulled out her phone and opened the voice recorder. For the past 2 months, she'd been working on a series of articles for the local newspaper about families finding their way back to each other. This story, their story, would be the centerpiece. But first, she had a dinner to help cook with her husband and daughter. Later that evening, after the kitchen had been cleaned, with more laughter than efficiency, after Mia had been tucked into bed with stories and songs, Charlotte and Graham sat on their back porch with cups of tea, watching the first stars appear. "Charlotte," Graham said quietly, "thank you." "For what?" "For not giving up, for filing those divorce papers, for loving me enough to fight for us, even when I'd forgotten how to fight for us myself." Charlotte curled her legs under her in the porch swing they'd bought last month. Another sign of Graham's commitment to slowing down, to creating spaces for rest and connection. "You know what the funny thing is?" she said. "I was so angry when I wrote that note. You didn't betray me with another woman. You betrayed me with your absence. I thought I was ending something." "You were," Graham said, reaching for her hand. You were ending the marriage we had so we could build the marriage we wanted. And what kind of marriage is that? Graham was quiet for a moment, listening to the crickets chirp in their garden, feeling the weight of Charlotte's hand in his. The kind where presence is a choice we make every day, he said finally. Where love isn't something we assume will always be there, but something we tend carefully, like Mia's sunflowers. Charlotte leaned against his shoulder, breathing in the scent of his cologne mixed with garden soil and contentment. I love you, Graham Lockwood. I love you too, Charlotte Lockwood. Thank you for teaching me how to come home. Above them, the stars wheeled slowly across the October sky, witness to a family that had learned the most important lesson of all, that love isn't something you earn through achievement or prove through provision. Love is something you choose moment by moment, day by day, with the simple revolutionary act of being present for the people who matter most. And in a small house with a growing garden and a 9-year-old who still believed in sunflower festivals, the Lockwood family had finally learned how to choose each other every single day. Thank you for joining the Lockwood family on their journey back to each other. Sometimes the greatest adventures happen not in distant places, but in the courage to come home. What did you think of Graham and Charlotte's story? Have you ever had to choose between success and presence in your own life? We'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences. Your participation in our channel is very important to us. Please share your opinion in the comments below. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to our channel and leave a comment below letting us know what you thought. Your feedback and support mean a lot to us. Stay tuned for more exciting stories.